all of my infrastructure. All of this you could take up, put it into a big pile and set it on fire, and in 2 days I'd be back running again. And for very little cost, if any. Here are my top 5 electric fencing hacks for the Frugal Homestead. So garden hose connectors. That's been something I've been playing around with quite a bit. With moderate success. I'll kind of get into that. But you can't beat this price because these basically are free. This was garden hose that someone was going to throw out and I save it. The best thing I've found is like your ordinary little lop shears that you have for the garden. Either the big ones or the small ones make really quick work of cutting it down into whatever length you like. About 2 inches seems to be pretty good. Okay, so basically what I've done here is I've taken and drilled a small hole through this side that goes all the way through to the other side. And right here is that bigger hole that allows this to go in the other way, of course, but to drive all the way down through, and that means that it sits all the way back up against here because it's garden hose. You can smash it in there and it's going to be well out of the way of these wires and the offset. Now, in this particular one, I have drilled it, or sliced it through rather, with a razor blade so that the wire can slide in like this. Now, if you mount it on the pole up and down like this, you can use this configuration to help you drop a wire that is too high. Conversely, you can flip it around the other way if you need to get it up off of the ground, and it works really pretty well. One of the drawbacks though is because this particular one has some of the nylon webbing and things in there. Sometimes it doesn't really short, but it kind of arcs a little bit. I haven't seen it degrade any of the performance of the fence, but it definitely does arc a little bit, especially when it's wet. It's my lovely little assistant down there is helping out. So one way you can do this is just an old cedar stick, really, that I just sharpen on one end, and you can put these hose insulators, you see how they're mounted right there, and the wire will go into each one of these little notches here that are predetermined by space. Now all I have to do is drive it into the ground to the point where that bottom wire gets to the height that I want. So there's a lot of extra stick on this one because I can really drive it in the ground and make it pretty solid. But you can do this onto a 2x4 and strap it to a tree. I don't recommend nailing directly to a tree. It doesn't do the tree any good, or your chainsaw later on if you happen to want to cut that tree. But you can't beat the price on these because all of these cost me absolutely nothing. So here's an example of how this works. I've got this cut so you can pull that wire out on both sides, and you can see back there that roofing nail is driven all the way to the back edge, and it's not interfering with this wire in any way. And then you just kind of pop it in there, and that wire is not going anywhere. It is nice and solid. So one of the limitations of this particular design is if you don't line these holes up when you're drilling it, you can end up with this one a little bit too close to the wood. So if this post doesn't drive in completely right, that wire will end up being awfully close or even touching on that side. Another way to use garden hose is to wrap around these trees like I have here. Well, this is not a tree, but a post. But some of the limitations on this is sometimes I've heard that it will wear out over time, and that little arc will cause that to fail right inside of there. This fence is very much on, and pigs are coming to join us. But all I do is wrap it around the post and then put one fencing staple around it right there, and it's good to go. Hey, pigs. And the wire's right here, and they're very unlikely to come any closer than this.
Hey, buddy.
Hey, pretty pigs. Next up are wooden posts. In this particular case, this is a cedar post. And how to make them, I just cut down cedar trees. This is pretty simple. Again, this one's about this big around. And what I do is I dig down about a foot with post hole diggers, and I sharpen this on the other end with a hatchet and kind of get it to a nice point, and then just drive it home the rest of the way with a sledgehammer. All of that means that what you see here is about 4 feet outside of the ground, and what's underneath the ground ends up being about 2 feet. So this post is locust, and these will last, again, a long time. This is probably about a foot into the ground, and I mean, you can really put something on it. But in this particular case, I used these store-bought insulators and just nailed them in there at the heights that I needed. But this is only, gosh, maybe 2 inches in diameter all the way around. but it is still extremely solid. So this is an example of a cedar post that is a split post. Now I don't like to use a whole lot of these because they aren't quite as strong, but they're still, it's not going anywhere. The problem comes is when you make them this thin. This is only about 1 inch thick. When you make them this thin and you actually put the insulators on there, you have a problem with splitting and cracking. Also, when you're trying to drive it in, it tends to split or crack a little bit more. But they will work, and the way I do it is I just space out these. This post right here is in between two much thicker, much more solid posts. So as long as you stagger it out, this is really just doing the job of holding up the fence a little bit. And this is way, way, way stronger than a step-in. I use cedar because that's what I have here. I've used some locusts because that's what I have here. Even if you don't have woods, I bet you can find somebody, if you ask around, that has cedar trees or locust trees or hedge apples or Osage orange, same thing. If you have somebody that has a property or has a fence row, I bet you'll be able to find free wood to be able to do this with, even if you don't have woods yourself. There are lots of pros with this. The flexibility, like I talked, if they break, you cut it off and you put a new one down. It doesn't cost you a dime. You don't have to worry about metal being stuck in the ground. You don't need heavy equipment at all to install these. Don't let anybody tell you that you can't use certain woods because they won't last that long. They're not trying to span the Golden Gate Bridge. This is just holding up 2 little pieces of wire. You don't need to go overboard with this stuff. If you combine this with the store-bought insulators, those store-bought insulators run you about 12 cents a piece if you want to break that cost down. So it runs you about $0.25 to put in each of these fence posts. If you use the garden hose fence insulators, that doesn't cost you a thing. That means that everything here is free. But there's a lot of time involved in this. It's a whole lot easier just to run to the store and pick up a box of step-ins. But to make the final post took about a half a day, or 4 hours if you want to look at it that way, to make 50 posts. Pardon the interruption, but I got to take a second and say, please, if you like what you're seeing, please like and please share this video with somebody else. More importantly than that is comment down below, because what you'll find and what we feel very strongly is it's the power of the community, of the homesteaders like us, of the people who are doing things like this. And your 2-sentence comment down below might be the one thing and answer the question that somebody had of something that I missed, or maybe I made a mistake. Please do that. Put that comment down below, add that question down below, and help somebody else out who may have been thinking the exact same thing. My absolute favorite Frugal Homestead electric fencing hack is PVC insulators. PVC is super strong, super cheap, and this is easy to make. So all you have to do for this one is take a small piece of PVC and imagine the whole pipe is here, cut it off at 45 degrees there, scoot it down, roll it over, and cut it again. And you end up only using about 2 inches of pipe. Then just drill 2 small pilot holes where your mounting screws or your nails are going to go. And then all you have to do is take that scrap of wire and run it right through here and then twist your wire on. So this is up against the post and your wire will run up against this thing. And it's got all of this space. And once you run that wire in there, it is not going to slide up or slide down and short out. It will stay in this spot. So around here, 10 feet of this 3/4 inch Schedule 40 PVC costs about $2.50. So this costs, again, about a nickel, little less than a nickel. Compare that to the cheapest insulators that you can get around here, and that comes out to 12 cents per. Well, if you're doing 3 or 2 for every fence post, you can see how that comes out to be at most 15 cents. That's just a little bit more than the cost of one of those store-bought insulators. And those store-bought, those are the cheap ones, the ones with the little tabs, and they break constantly. But the durability is absolutely outstanding with these. If you want to drill the hole through and then thread these onto your wire, if you know how many posts you're gonna have, you would save even more and it'd be even stronger. These things are just about indestructible. El Cheapo, the little yellow insulators, again, I find those tabs break all the time. The black ones are a little bit better, but they still do break. And actually when they get hot, those little tabs tend to bend. so you lose that tension in the fence. So when it gets really, really hot, the plastic gets more susceptible to bending. And then likewise, when it's really, really cold and the wire starts to contract and pull in, it'll actually pull those tabs apart. Haven't had that happen with these things yet, and that wire twist method. So that's really, really awesome. Okay, so this is another application of the PVC. This is probably about an 8-inch piece of PVC cut at a 45-degree angle, and I needed an offset to run this single wire that will keep the sheep. You can probably see some of the hair where they were really rubbing up and shedding, our hair sheep, and really doing a number on the fence and kept popping off staples and just causing a big mess. Put one big decking screw that runs right and snugs this whole thing up to the fence. And I'm telling you, that is 10 times stronger than any of the store-bought offsets that you can buy. And it'll take quite a force to break this. The next is rehabbing these step-in posts. Now, for whatever reason, I feel like I've got dozens and dozens of these things that are broken lying around, but I couldn't find one, and well, they're out there somewhere. But what happens is these little tabs break. And when these little tabs break, you kind of lose everything, because here at our homestead, we really only use this one, and sometimes that one, but not that often. So we're really only using these two. So if this one breaks and this one breaks, this is pretty much a useless post. Not quite. Take your handy dandy little drill, and all you got to do with a little small little drill is take that and drill a hole right through that spot right there. And then, just like you saw on the PVC insulators, take your little scrap of wire, and now you can run that wire through, and you can use this and twist that right up and run your wire right through there. Now, it doesn't mean that you can put it on and take it off as quick as you can, but you have now just saved this post from going into the garbage heap. Generally speaking, if one tab breaks, another tab is going to break pretty soon. So what you end up doing is you're like, well, okay, that's not ideal, but you move it from this tab to this tab, and next thing you know, they're broken up and down the whole post. This way, it's not trash. Don't throw it away. Just drill a couple little holes in there and run little scraps of wire, and this thing will keep on trucking for, well, I'm not going to say many years, because they really just don't last that long. This is probably going to break before anything else, but that's a huge cost savings to allow you to extend the life on this thing. Now, what it doesn't do is straighten this out. But again, I have more of these, but I couldn't find a single one. They're out there in the field. So what I've done in the past is taken a small scrap of wood, usually like a 1x material, and rip it on the table saw about this length, and then just run it up the back and then zip tie that to this. Yeah, I'm sorry I couldn't find an example for you, but that really helps to straighten it out if you do need to put a little bit of attention onto these things. But those two things, it doesn't help you when this foot breaks, but if you've got one of the tabs that breaks and you've got one that is just completely bent to nothing, that really saves you. Extension cords. Now, my term for extension cords on this is just scraps of wire. See, what I have going on right here is I have the my energizer over here, because that's where my ground rod is. But where I need to energize is over there. Sometimes it's over there, and sometimes I need to energize something that's back over there. And I don't have a whole lot of energizers. I got a few, and I have some flexibility to move around our 11 acres, but I don't always like to have the same things on the same systems. I don't have a big insulator to run the whole system yet. I'd really like to do that. But all this extension cord is just a scrap of wire that runs from my energizer over to the fence where I want to energize it. Now, if you're just starting out and you don't have a lot of extra fence lying around, even then the cost of running a few feet, in this case it's probably about 20 feet, is just minimal. So all you do is you just run one piece of the wire, starting here, connect it back to the energizer, and then run it down over to where I need it to go. And usually at that point I put an alligator clip or something on the end, but I don't always. You can just tie it right into the existing fence and go on. Now what this does for you is it's a whole lot cheaper than that underground or above ground wire, the insulated wire that they sell in the store. That stuff's very expensive, and 25 feet of that stuff will start adding up really quick. Whereas this stuff is used from scraps, because the way we do the paddock rotation for pigs and sheep and everything else, you end up with all these little pieces of sections, and then you want to graze it differently. So you pull that wire up and you run it a different way, or you just roll it up all together, and you end up with these scraps lying around. And it's just, this provides so much extra flexibility. It also allows you to only run one wire, so you can use things like this post, which is just rebar, and the broken step in. So most of the wires that we run are knee height or below for sheep and pigs, and those are the ones that break first. So if you have a step in, you can use those higher intervals or higher clips on the step in and still be able to use that post somewhere else. And this really helps. So everywhere that I have an Energizer, generally speaking, I have a series of extension cords nearby that are 20 feet, 30 feet, or 10 feet, but I don't hesitate to cut them in any length that I need to, because you can always just tie them back together and they're just as good. I'm not running any tension on this thing, but it's just enough to get that charge from the Energizer over to the fence that I need it, and if I need to move things around, that's where that goes. The cost of this system is free, really, because I'm using pieces of fence that I'd already used someplace else and rolled up and decided I don't want to run over there or running a different configuration. Sometimes we go from 3-wire systems to 2-wire systems as the animals get used to it. So the cost is really nothing, but the pros on this system is the flexibility, because now you have all these, what I end up with are all these little different coils of wire, and I know kind of roughly from looking at them how far I can reach with them, but if I don't, I just grab another one and cut off a new section and go with it. So the flexibility is huge, it's really good, and it allows me to be free to put a pasture anywhere that I want to, whether I'm using electric netting, because I can use this to hook up to electric netting too, and whatever I use, it just gives me a lot of flexibility out in the pasture. Now the cons is, well, you know, I'm looking at a wire and I've got it flagged and I kind of know where it is. This is in a very low traffic, we don't walk through here, but sometimes you put up one of the extension cords and you forget that it's there, and hopefully you de-energized it, because there's nothing like a 9,000 volt surprise to let you know that you left a wire there. So I typically try to do these at very visible heights and then flag it with some survey tape. This one's not, I mean, there's a big pole right here, so that's kind of a reminder to not go this way. But also, if unwinding and winding these pieces of wire, even though they're short, it's still kind of a pain. You get tangled on everything, and then when you go to unwind them, they always get a little bit tangled. So it's not the greatest thing out there, and I wish I had a little bit more of different types of rope and braid to be able to roll it up and roll it back, but this is what I have, and this is cheap, and this is easy, so this is kind of what I end up with. But this is what most of them look like. They've still got the survey tape on them, and I just coil them up and then wrap around 2 edges so it stays nice and light. Now I can look at this and I can sort of guesstimate how far it's going to get me, but I wouldn't grab this one, because this one is for one specific section, and I just leave that there. But I wouldn't hesitate to grab another one of these that I have lying around, spool off as much as I need, and then roll it back up into this form. So this is it's pretty darn convenient. I used to have all these rat's nests of coiled wire just lying over in the corner. Then I'd trip over them because I'd forget they're there, especially early in the morning or late at night, and I'm out checking on animals or doing something. But coiling them up just like this and just twisting the end around keeps it in a pretty nice little shape that I can toss even over my shoulder and walk out and do what I need to do. But that's basically what that looks like. You want to say thanks for watching? No? Gotten shy all of a sudden? Okay, but thanks for watching, everybody. It means a lot to us when you comment back and kind of keeps us motivated. It's a very busy time of year and lots of things going on. All the craziness that's going on out there. We're largely unaffected by that, but we see the impact and we see the effect that it has on others. And you know, we pray for you every day. We pray every day for an end to all this craziness and stuff. So I hope that you would do the same. Please put us in your prayers. We would appreciate that. And stay tuned, and we'll see you next time. So by able to